I think is also probably on a lot of parents' minds or people listening is this idea that you bring up around prompt dependence. And you touched on it, before when you said I sit with my kid with the screen open to do their homework. But what about the idea of like over checking on your kids? Like over did you do your homework? Did you do your homework? Like because I think that happens with a lot of parents. And then it gets into the arguing.
Yeah, so that is helicopter parenting. Most parents don't want to admit they're helicopter parents, but they are. And when you're over prompting, you're keeping them prompt dependent. You're creating that prompt dependency. You're too involved. The parents that are following them every step of the way, every morning routine, because so many parents are stuck in this horrible, horrible mindset of if I don't step in, nothing gets done.
Do you ever find yourself just scrolling on your phone, knowing exactly what you need to do or would rather be doing, but just not doing it? Or if you're a parent, your kid's sitting at the kitchen table, maybe their homework's out, or their pencil's ready to work on stuff, but they're completely frozen or distracted by something else. And you just keep prompting them to follow through on what you think they need to be doing, which inevitably just leads to stress, arguments, and of course, more fighting. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Michael McLeod. He is the creator of GrowNOW ADHD, and he calls this what it is. It's not an attention disorder, it's a performance disorder. It's not a motivation problem, and it's not a discipline issue. And here's what I love Michael cuts through all the noise. He's not into pseudoscience. He's very much into real science, what the research shows. He's not just trying to give us try harder advice. He brings the research and tools in this interview. So, we're going to talk about how screens hijack the brain. That's relevant to us as adults, that's relevant to our own parenting, how we accidentally train our kids to become prompt dependent. It's almost like we can't help it. We feel like if we don't follow through, they're not going to actually succeed, and what it takes to build real internal independence. So, if you've ever thought, why can't I or my kid just follow through? This episode is going to change the way you see what ADHD is, and it's going to help you out a lot. I loved hanging out with Michael McLeod. I got a ton out of this, and you're going to too. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, Michael McLeod, welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege to be here. I was so happy when you reached out to have me on. I love everything you're doing with your social media and this podcast. You're really spreading some great evidence-based information in a world where that's very hard to find.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And I was really attracted to your work because I know a lot of people and how I've worked with who have experienced ADHD symptoms, who have been diagnosed with ADHD. I feel like it's within my family as well. And so this is a topic that's close to my heart. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you. And I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about ADHD. So you teach a lot about this in your work, obviously, on your Instagram channel, with all the clinics that you have out there. What would you say? Can you take a moment for us just to define what ADHD is? What's how prevalent is it out there right now? Let's just begin there.
Sure. So I think, ADHD, the way Dr. Russell Barkley describes it, and if you have the slightest interest in ADHD, you need to look at the work of Dr. Russell Barkley. He is second to none, the worldwide leader, the best of the best. Don't follow me, follow him. He has incredible information, a great YouTube channel. Read his books, read his research. He's the one that's really spreading real evidence-based information. And on social media, you're going to get a lot of misinformation. So really, the way he describes ADHD is it's really the most misunderstood disorder or diagnosis in all of psychiatry. Still to this day, people hear ADHD and they think it's an attention disorder. It's not about attention. It is a horribly named disorder that causes these kids to be labeled as lazy, non-compliant, not interested, bad parents, those kinds of things. And it's causing them to be sent to all of these inappropriate therapies and approaches that aren't helping. As part of GrowNow, I handle all of the intake calls. So when parents are interested in GrowNow services, they speak to me first before signing up. And pretty much every parent I talk to has been through months and months and years and thousands of dollars and thousands of hours of therapies and interventions that just didn't work at all. And they're just stuck, and they are skeptical, and they are tired, and they are burnt out because ADHD is so misunderstood. ADHD is not an attention disorder. It's not about hyperactivity and kids who can't sit still and kids who can't focus in school. It's not about inattentiveness. It is a disorder of executive functions. And we have to, once again, executive functions are very much misunderstood. People hear the term executive functions, and the first two things that pop into their mind are time management and organization. Messy backpacks, messy folders, messy bedrooms, and not being able to clean up after themselves, which is absolute ridiculous. That is very outdated information. Executive functions are the most crucial set of skills that any individual can attain across the lifespan. They are the greatest predictor of success we have. Not GPA, not high school degree, not where you go to college. It is executive functions that help you move out of your parents' house, get a job, keep a job, make friends, keep friends. So ADHD is a disorder of executive functions, and it is all about self-regulation,
Ah,
self-regulation of emotions, language, body, behavior. It's not hyperactivity in kids who can't sit still. They can't self-regulate and manage their body. It's not about inattentiveness and can't manage their mind. It's about an inability to regulate their thoughts and their mind.
okay. Um, that's interesting because and this is perfect for this podcast. I'm so glad we have you on here. The emotional longevity is emotional health. How do we have emotional health in the long run? Emotional health, it seems like what you're describing here, the ability to self-regulate, the ability to, when you say manage your body, say more? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that's part of self-regulation. Regulation is, obviously the number one thing. So like I said earlier, people still think of ADHD as this school-based disorder. And there's still a lot of really powerful doctors and neuropsychs that are telling parents, we're going to prescribe this medication, but only take it on school days, not on the weekends, not over the summer, which is ridiculous. You don't take medication vacations. It's not just so
Yeah.
they can pay attention in class. This is medication they need for life, for all areas. So there's three separate zones of executive functioning. Of course, number one is academic, being a good student, getting your work done, getting good grades, being the best you can be at school, not getting in trouble at school, not calling out. But really, the number one symptom of ADHD is actually not academic, it's actually home executive functioning. And home executive functioning presents itself in two specific ways: self regulation towards parents, and the ability
Mm,
to initiate, persist, and complete non preferred and non screen based tasks in the home. Because the home is where the screens are. The homes tend to look like casinos and arcades these days with a number of screens in them. And that's very, very dangerous to the ADHD brain. And the third is social executive functioning, not social skills and eye contact, topic maintenance, social executive functioning, which is perspective taking and situational awareness. So when I'm talking about self regulation, it's self regulation in various environments. Can you regulate your emotions, which is the number one thing? Emotional control, emotion management is the number one symptom of ADHD. Even though, if you look in the most recent edition of the DSM, the Diagnostic Standards Manual, and you look at the diagnostic criteria needed to diagnose ADHD, you're not going to see the word emotions listed there at all, which is completely ridiculous and shows how behind we are. It's all about
mm.
emotions. Talk to any parent, talk to any teacher of kids with ADHD. It's all about emotions. So, emotions, language, body, behavior. Can we regulate ourselves in the moment? Because, as Dr. Russell Barkley describes it, you're able to aim your behavior towards the future. So, when we hear ADHD, we think of kids that are impulsive. They're so impulsive. And the reason they're impulsive is because they are stuck in the present moment. They are time blind. There's no nonverbal working memory hindsight and remembering the past, learning from the past. There's no nonverbal working memory foresight and looking into the future so they can better plan, prioritize, problem solve, and delay gratification. And if you can't aim your behavior towards the future and delay gratification, all self regulation requires deferred gratification, delayed gratification. So we have to be able to regulate our emotions, language, body, behavior, us as a whole self, a whole human, towards the future.
It's really funny because growing up for me, my wife always makes this joke that when she met me, I had all of my files for finances, for, anything that could possibly be for anything, all in one folder labeled my cat's name.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. And so, however, at the same time, one of my greatest strengths growing up has been being able to delay gratification and look towards the future and do something now so that there could be a payoff later. So, there's always been this thing in my family, or certainly with my wife, that said like you have some level of undiagnosed ADHD. And so, listening to you right now, I'm like, well, okay, well, hold on. I had that delayed gratification element is something that lives in me intrinsically, but there is something with me and organization and that kind of stuff that wasn't there. And yet I teach about emotional health and emotions management, and so I've done a lot of work on that, with myself and around self-regulation. So I think it's really fascinating what you're talking about. Tell me a little bit about. I think there's a lot of people listening right now who feel like they probably over time have meandered into feeling like they have some version of ADHD just from the training that we've gotten with screens. So we have our kids that we have to work with their screen management, and adults. Of course, we know this. We've heard this 1,000 times. We're our own worst enemy with it to some degree, and so we're starting to train this like short term attention span. So how do you differentiate between like meandering into feeling like you have a little ADHD-ness versus, what's happening with us in our culture right now?
Yeah, so all throughout time, there's always been one of those things where it's like, hey, I kind of feel like I have a little ADHD. I feel like I'm a little neurodiverse. Everyone gets distracted. Everyone procrastinates to some level. Everyone would rather, do something fun than do something boring. That's part of being a human being. But now we're going through this very sick and twisted science experiment on human beings by giving them constant entertainment in their pocket 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And somewhere along the line, we thought that was a good idea to give that to children and think that kids should have phones and they'll still want to go outside and still want to do homework and still want to do boring things. So, the sad thing about ADHD is in today's world, you cannot discuss ADHD without also discussing very severe and fully debilitating screen addictions.
Hmm.
Those two things go 100% hand in hand. It is very hard to find an ADHD individual from birth to 18, 19, 20 years old that is not significantly addicted to screens. So, boys with video games, girls with their cell phones and social media, just all of those things. And, what's sad is that this constant entertainment deprives them of boredom. And what do we do
Yeah.
when what do we do? We use our imagination and we talk to ourselves and we think about our day, we think about our past, we visualize our future, we use our imagination, and we learn to self-soothe and self-regulate through boredom. And if we can't do that, if we're never bored, being bored is like going to the gym for your brain. It's strengthening that self-regulation muscle. So being constantly entertained and never being bored and never playing, never having a real childhood really delays the skill of executive functioning and hurts your ability to develop executive functions at a normal pace. So phones and screens and constant entertainment and the extinction of play, the extinction of boredom delays executive functioning skills. And it makes people more than ever think, hey, I have ADHD. Because instead of, reading that book, going to the gym, reaching out to your friends, doing the things that you want to do. Everybody has some goals, whether it's health related, fitness related, career related, finance related. Everyone wants something bigger and better. That's how human beings are. No one's ever content with their current lives. They want something else. But we tend to get
Progress
lost.
feels good.
Yeah, progress feels good, but we tend to get lost on Instagram, TikTok, social media, just nonsense. And then people end up convincing themselves, I have ADHD. And it's quite sad in today's world. It's not that hard to get an ADHD diagnosis. You can go to your pediatrician and you can express some concerns and you can get a prescription for ADHD medication pretty easily. And who am I to say, does that person really have ADHD or really doesn't? I don't know. This is all based on the unique individual, but with the diagnoses rates absolutely skyrocketing, sure, you can make the argument that we just have more awareness to it, sure. And you can also make the argument that we're overdiagnosing. Do we know what's the real answer? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But obviously screens and this phone-based world we live in is having a negative impact on socialization and society in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a fun fact, I remember learning years ago that Ritalin was initially a antidepressant.
Yep.
It was used as an antidepressant. Then it got kind of segued over to working with ADHD. And then, of course, we have a number of other medications now that people use for that. Why do you think you mentioned a second ago, you kind of alluded to ADHD being less about attention and more about performance. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think that delineation is really important.
Yeah, so that's really what it is. And Dr. Russell Barkley does a great job describing this. He basically describes it as the brain is split into two separate pieces. The back of the brain is knowledge, where we have our IQ, where we know the information, where we know what to do. So I always like to use the analogy of an ADHD child going to class at the library for the day. They know that when they're in the library, they have to be quiet. They know that's the rule. They know that. But what's going to happen when you open that door to the library and they enter that library? They know they have to be quiet, but what are the chances of them actually being quiet in the library? Slim to none. Was it a question of IQ and them not knowing what to do? No, it's a question of performance. It is a performance disorder, not an attention disorder. It's, if anything, it's attention to the future disorder. It's your inability to recognize what the future might look like, create multiple different scenarios of, plan A, plan B, plan C of what the future might look like eventually, and aim your behavior towards that future to delay gratification and self-regulate towards that future. So this heavy focus on attention and being able to focus, it's really an inability to perform in the natural environment, which is exactly why we're fully understanding now all of these talk therapies, counseling, it's cognitive behavioral therapy just isn't working for ADHD kids 18 and below. They don't have the core skills to be successful in those things. And talking to a therapist in a therapist office for an hour a week, that's not going to change their behavior at home and at school. It's not going to do anything. The intervention has to be at the point of performance. That's why we're seeing a massive shift now towards parent training.
That makes sense. I've always felt like I have this kind of gripe with therapy in general, even though I do therapy and I have a small private practice, but I run therapeutic coaching program. The reason I have my gripe is that I think for a lot of things in life, the context of application is really important. And we know repetition is the mother of mastery. And so how does 1 hour a week like really translate into, really efficient and effective work when it's not reaching into the home environment or the
It,
other contact work or home environment? And
exactly.
it right, it does, but it's slow moving. Okay, or it does not maybe as effectively with ADHD, but in some areas you get insights, you get things, you can apply things to your relationships if there's no a relational thing that you learned in therapy or it's come up for you, communication. But oftentimes, even in that case, you might have some insight that comes up and you might not apply it because then the fear arises or the hesitation or the aversion that's more subconscious and you actually don't apply it. So something I like what you're saying more about how do you then work with people and get that to happen, the application in the context of these different places of their life to make it more effective.
Yeah, so really the foundation to the GrowNOW model of internal skills, this model that I created and we did research on, is the parent training aspect. So
Mm.
basically what we do is we combine working directly with the student with the parent training. And really the main reason, the real foundational reason we work with the student is that helps us to individualize the parent training so it's not one size fits all. We now know the student, we know their strengths, their needs, their likes, their dislikes. Now we know exactly what to tell this parent instead of just giving them generalized blanketed information without really knowing their child as a unique individual. So we've done a great job understanding that autism is a spectrum from mild to moderate to severe, and some of them are going to need help the rest of their lives, some will be able to be independent. It's the same with ADHD. No two ADHD kids are the same, even if it's two hyperactive kids, two inattentive kids. That's meaningless. Those are labels for insurance purposes. That tells me nothing about that individual child. So we get to know the student, we build that rapport, we build that relationship with the student. It's a very relationship and experience based model. Really, there's nothing that strengthens executive functions more than varied experiences, doing as many different things as you can from birth to 18 years old, getting your hands into everything. It's sad in today's world. It's a lot of wake up, go to school, come home, stay home. No after school activities, no clubs. You're home on screens all day until bedtime, possibly until 1 in the morning, bringing your phone into your bedroom. So we need to get kids out riding bikes, doing things, going to the park, joining clubs, joining sports, going to the YMCA. So it's all about building those relationships and those experiences and training them through exercises and strategies to strengthen those internal skills, combined with the parent training to ensure that those skills transfer into the natural environment as quickly as possible. And a lot of it is parent empowerment, because a lot of parents today are being taught through pseudoscience on social media that when you make your child uncomfortable, they're going to stop loving you. It's going to ruin their relationship, and you're going to traumatize them long term. And if you take away their screens, they're going to lose all of their friends. They're going to overindulge when they're later in life. They're going to not have anything to talk about in social environments. They're going to feel all left out. When meanwhile, the opposite is true. When you remove screens, they're more regulated, they make more friends, and they're less tempted later in life. So it's teaching parents to step into their parental authority, set those boundaries, and ensure the child has varied experiences, because parenting has become way too difficult these days, and there's too much parent burnout, and parents are frustrated because of the helicopter parenting. Kids are home too much under parent supervision. Parents don't have times for themselves, and kids are staying prompt dependent because their houses look like casinos.
Okay, I want to put a bookmark in that prompt dependent thing right there for a second because I want to talk about that. But prior to that, I was having a conversation with another guest named Jennifer Cohen about this specific thing about parents and their approach with their kids. And she's pretty hardline because she's like, I don't understand. And I was saying that I think there's a generational thing happening here because it's so widespread that so many parents are having a hard time drawing boundaries with their kids because they're having a hard time drawing boundaries with themselves is
Yep.
a reality. We live in this time that you and I have just been talking about where the algorithm is stronger than, ever. We've never in human history had an experiment, like you said, like this. And so parents are having a hard time with themselves. And so I think there's an innate sense of hypocrisy when they're trying to draw these lines with their kids and not seeing I think what you're saying, which is so here's a symptom of ADHD that's happening with parents. Doesn't mean they're neurodivergent. I think it's a very important distinction there, right? But here's a symptom where they're having a hard time drawing boundaries with themselves. So there's this innate hypocrisy in saying that, okay, but you need to draw this boundary. I know you see me on my phone all the time and I have a hard time regulating that, but I need you to do that. And then there's this burnout that you're talking about, which leads to this giving up. And because it's just too hard. Okay, just too hard. Go take it type of thing. So what do you say to parents, around this? Because I know this is your part of your parenting curriculum that you're giving. It has to include this.
Well, this mindset of my kid sees me on my phone, I have to give him a phone. I'm addicted to my phone, so he should have a phone too. That's you waving the white flag to big tech.
Right.
Parents will literally convince themselves of literally anything to keep them from having to remove screens from their kid. Just those 2-3 weeks of withdrawal behaviors of your kid breaking things, screaming, yelling, whatever. Parents will do anything to avoid those 3 weeks of behaviors because it terrifies them. So they tell themselves, "Oh, I'm on my phone all the time. My kid should too." Well, your kid sees you driving all the time. Should he be able to drive? Your kid sees you voting and drinking. Should they be able to do those things? No, they shouldn't, because they're not ready for those things at all. Their brain is not ready for that intense level of stimulation. You go to work all day. You you have a job. You went through childhood already. You have a fully developed brain. The brain develops until 30 years old. Your kids don't. They need real experiences. They need boredom. They need play. They need boundaries. So this constant, just these cognitive distortions that parents convince themselves of to keep screens in the child's life, they're waving the white flag. And this whole concept of the perfect parent. Only in really, it's America is the place where parenting has become this science where, there's parenting podcasts, there's parenting algorithms, there's parenting experts. In so many other countries, it's not that at all. It's like, these are my kids. I'm the adult. They're going to follow my lead. If I have errands to run, they're coming with me. This is adult led, not child led. Only in America do we have this baby Einstein and Kuman and all this nonsense. And like, we have to constantly train our child to have them develop into this amazing person. That's not how it works. You're the adult, you're the parent. If your child is screaming at you, cursing, saying no, being late to school, all of these things, and parents are so caught up in the perfect parent, and my siblings are constantly fighting. That's normal. Siblings are supposed to fight. Every time there's a sibling fight, parents break down and think, I'm a failure. Every time there's a tantrum, their first thought is, how do I end this tantrum as fast as possible? Because it's a reflection of my parenting. Kids are supposed to have big emotions. Kids are supposed to push buttons. Kids are supposed to fight each other. Their siblings are supposed to fight. It's not a reflection of your parenting. Your child's homework output is not a reflection of your parenting. What is a reflection of your parenting? How involved is your child in their community? Or are they on screens 24 hours a day? You have to start to think about these things. So overall, we have to start to think about, where are the boundaries? What is your child doing on a day-to-day basis? You want to get a good glimpse into your child's executive functions level. Okay, what are they doing? What do they do in their free time? Are they face-to-face with peers, or are they only socializing through technology? Are they joining after-school clubs? Are they going to camps over the summer? Are they involved in their school? Or do they wake up, go to school, come home, and stay home?
Yeah. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, so I'm a parent listening to this right now, and I imagine this is some of the stuff you teach in the Grow Now to the parenting, and it's part of your parenting training, right? But I'm listening to this right now, and unless I have something like that, like a structure like you're talking about, I'm like, okay, Michael, this sounds really good, and you're right. Okay, there's some good stuff, but then when push comes to shove in the moment, and so this is why, when you say that, it's really about emotions, emotion management. I think, like, okay, for parents, it's really about emotions, emotion
Yeah.
management, because you can be listening to Michael right now and saying like, okay, yeah, this is amazing, this is so true, or you might be pushing back because there's some inner defenses there, because there's reality to parental burnout, and maybe you are burnt out, and the reality is you're doing the best you can, and that's also true. But there needs to be some level of noticing when you feel overwhelmed as a parent, or you feel burnt out, and how that feeling is making decisions for you. And because the central part of our brain, which is holding our emotions, is influencing our perception and decision making. And so what do we do to manage those emotions that are there, to as a parent, to take care of my own inner world, so that I can, do the things that you're talking about in the moment,
Yeah.
in the moment.
Exactly. So, one of the things that parents need to be educated on is that it's not attention deficit disorder, it's negative attention seeking disorder. This is part of that pseudoscience on social media with all this connection seeking, connection seeking. When your kid has big behaviors, they just need more connection, which is absolute nonsense, because if anything, parents are connecting a little too much these days, not giving their kids enough space and enough time away from them. This is all that this is preying on parenting guilt and fear mongering. It's not, no, you're probably doing too much for your child. You need to fade back and give them more free time and more independence. So, yes, there is such a thing as negative attention seeking, and that is the ADHD brain. The ADHD brain is conflict seeking. Conflict and fighting and arguing and negotiating and emotional control over their parents gives them a dopamine rush. If there are two things that give the ADHD brain dopamine, number one, screens, number two, conflict. So the ADHD brain is the path of least resistance brain. So parents are always so caught up on, but how do I get them to do the task? How do I get them to get to school on time? How do I get them to clean their room? How do I get them to do a chore? How do I get them to do this, to do that? Well, you have to look at your environment first. Is the path of least resistance available to them? Do they have a phone on them all the time? Do they have access to video games? Do they have access to YouTube, Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, Brawl Stars? Do they have access to those things? You have to be the parent and remove those things. Okay, if screens aren't a problem, is conflict available to them? So many parents now, they wear too many hats, and they have the hat of the parent, and number two, the next hat they wear is the homework secretary hat. So many parents, especially moms, have made it their responsibility of, they know for that hour, 2 hours after school, they have to sit with their child, open their computer, open their school laptop, their school Chromebook, which I hate, by the way, and they have to open their Google Classroom, their Schoology, their Canvas, and homework's not going to get done unless I sit directly with him. But the ADHD brain would rather get into a 5-hour fight with their mom than do 5 minutes of homework, because that's more dopamine producing. I'm having a fight. I'm in emotional control. I have my mom and my dad in the palm of my hands. They're not cooking. They're not cleaning. They're not relaxing. They're focused on me. They're yelling at me. And I'm not doing this incredibly boring, stupid homework. I'm arguing, which makes me feel good, makes me feel in control. So what parents have to realize is, the number one thing is, think about your child's brain like an iPhone. And every time you argue with it, every time you bring attention to a negative behavior, you are plugging in their brain and charging it up. Every time you get dysregulated by your child and you let them see you angry, upset, frustrated, and you give in to your child's behavior, you're showing them that anger, frustration works, and you are giving them dopamine. And so many parents listening to this right now are probably saying, but I have ADHD. I can't manage my emotions because ADHD is hereditary. I'm sorry, I'm here to tell you, it's not an excuse. You are an adult. You are the parent. You can manage your emotions. Stop saying, I have ADHD. I can't follow best practices. That's the biggest thing I see on social media is, oh, but I have ADHD too. I can't do that. No, you can. That's called a negative fixed mindset. No more excuses. You are the adult. They are the child. If they start arguing and being rude, you walk away from them. Parents are so caught up on, but what's the consequence? What's the consequence? Don't worry about consequences. The best consequence is not getting your attention. 90% of ADHD behaviors need an audience. So if you remove the audience, you are removing those behaviors.
So then what do you, so this comes back to me, this comes to distress tolerance for the parent in some way, because you're saying walk away and the parent's thinking, my God, but they're not going to get their homework done. Oh my God, they're going to fail this class. Oh my God, especially to a high school student, let's say where the grades are starting to matter for college. Oh my God, this kid's at risk for a C, in these multiple classes or whatever, that kind of thing. So then there's this distress that the parent has that they have to learn how to manage. So let's say they're saying, okay, so I can't do it either. I have ADHD. But, whether the parent has ADHD or not, I think a lot of parents will experience this and this distress if you do have ADHD. And I would imagine you're noticing that belief coming up that, well, I can't do this either. Then with awareness comes power. So the power is, okay, let's get some support. This is good to listen to this podcast, go to your Instagram channel and also get support on, and maybe follow with GrowNOW. Probably, I'm guessing parents of kids with ADHD who follow your program, if they have ADHD, also learn how to work with their
Oh yeah,
ADHD just by default, right?
you
And so
got it.
go get support. With awareness, you can get support. Now you're empowered, which is really cool. But how do we work with that? What are some things you teach to work with that distress and to be able to draw these boundaries that you're talking about when these kids have endless control to these different things, all these dopamine hits, and if they don't, then they get the arguing and then that gets the dopamine hit, right? And so what are some things you teach to be able to draw these boundaries and then also to be able to manage the distress? Taking a quick break here. If you're enjoying this conversation, I'd love to invite you to join my free newsletter. Every week, I share practical insights, tiny shifts, or emotional pivots you can make in your everyday life for your emotional health, and simple practices to help you build emotional resilience without the overwhelm. And when you sign up, you'll also get instant access to free guides I've created, like 5 AI prompts to ease anxiety and 4 steps to process difficult emotions, and more to come. It's the best way to stay connected, get my latest tools, and create a healthy inbox that supports your growth. Just head to the show notes, join the newsletter today. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things is, what tends to happen with ADHD kids is they wake up, go to school, come home, stay home. And all of these horrible behaviors of property destruction, cursing at parents, all of these things become this little secret that stays within the walls of the home. And so many parents I talk to are like, "Oh, I go to the school and I tell the teachers about what he's like at home." And they're like, "Whoa, you're talking about a totally different kid. I don't, we never see any of that at school." So all of these behaviors become this little secret within the home, this negative little best kept secret of the home. Parents are putting too much on their shoulders. Back in the day, kids were held accountable to more than just the parents. There were teachers, counselors, social workers, coaches, aunts, uncles, neighbors, your friends' parents, were involved in the child's life. Now, with screens, kids are sedentary in the home multiple hours a day, and everything's becoming a secret. And when things stay a secret, it keeps the behaviors going. When the behaviors no longer become a secret and other people become involved and hold that child accountable, those behaviors go away pretty quickly. So it's all about learning to utilize your tribe and bring other people in. If there's three specific things that instantly add stress and anxiety to the ADHD parent's mind, it's morning routine, evening routine, and homework. First of all, morning routine is all about getting them to school on time. If they're late to school, there has to be consequences at school for them being late. If they're in homework, I know the word home is in homework, but guess what? Homework is school based, not home based. If they don't get homework done, there has to be consequences at school. Somewhere along the line, we've gotten a little too big into accommodations, accommodations, accommodations. Sure, there's accommodations that ADHD kids need. They should be able to sit in the front of the class. They should be able to take tests in a separate room. But it's not so much about accommodating them, it's about increasing the consequences, making them more prevalent, making them more obvious. Dr. Russell Barkley talks about this all the time. If you want to see an ADHD child fail, take away the consequences. And that's what we have done. We have over accommodated. 4 accommodation plans at public schools over the past 10 years have gone from 5 pages to 50 pages. And we're never taking away accommodations. And when we do that, too much falls on the shoulders of the parents. And if they're not falling asleep for evening routine, well, then, they're going to be tired at school the next day. They don't get their phone or video games, which they really shouldn't have in the first place. But there's other consequences for them not having a good nighttime routine. There's still too many kids taking their phone into their bedroom at night or their laptop or whatever it is, or playing video games until it's super late at night. You need to set those parenting boundaries immediately. If you have an ADHD child, they shouldn't have a phone, they shouldn't have video games, period. But you need to utilize your tribe and bring other people to hold your child accountable and increase the consequences in the natural environment. Parents are trying to do too much.
I think what's important about one of the things that's important about what you're saying is it reminds me of a quote. I think it was by Henry Ford. I'm not quite sure, that said, "Failing to prepare is preparing to fail."
Yeah, that's Henry Ford.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so this is about, okay, so you're listening to this right now. You're like, hey, this sounds good. This is so hard to do in like real life. And really, like, the first step is like carving out some time as you're listening to this to give yourself the gift. If you're a parent listening to this, or somebody who's a parent, and you're just listening to this because you're enjoying the conversation, to say, how can that you can, and let the person know, how can I just create some time to listen to this and prepare? Let me reflect on how I'm reacting to my kid. Am I falling into that fight scenario where there is that emotional control happening? It's just a first step is just the reflection. Do they have screens all the time, and they do stay up late, and they do, don't do well on a test, but the school now allows them to take the test over? Like, so there's a system issue that Michael's bringing up here. But where's my responsibility, and am I burnt out and overwhelmed, and in what way is that impacting my decision making with them, that's not allowing me to put these boundaries in place that I know is going to be supportive, or I'm afraid of the conflict that's there. And then what happens if that conflict happens? How do I walk away? And to practice these things. And one of the things that I like about what you say, Michael, which you use this word a few times, is, and I like to use this word too, which is play. You use it in the kind of like, we need to play more, but I want to kind of like allow people to adopt the mindset of playing with what you're talking about here. Involves a sense of curiosity. So I'm going to
Yep.
like try some of these things out and see what I notice within myself, see what I notice with my kids. Anyway, these are some things that came up for me. A question that I think is also probably on a lot of parents' minds or people listening is this idea that you bring up around prompt dependence, and you touched on it, by before when you said I sit with my kid with the screen open to do their homework. But what about the idea of like over checking on your kids, like over, did you do your homework? Did you do your homework? Like, because I think that happens with a lot of parents, and then it gets into the arguing.
Yeah, so that is helicopter parenting. Most parents don't want to admit they're helicopter parents, but they are. And when you're over prompting, you're keeping them prompt dependent. You're creating that prompt dependency. You're too involved. The parents that are following them every step of the way, every morning routine, because so many parents are stuck in this horrible, horrible mindset of, if I don't step in, nothing gets done. And they are stuck, literally stuck. There are so many parents we've worked with through our parent training program where we have convinced them nothing's going to get better until you step back. And we've had a large amount of parents just be like, you know what, I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable, but I'm going to listen to this parent trainer. I'm going to listen to this coach and follow these evidence-based practices. And these parents learn to, create a couple of visuals. And then when the morning routine comes and it's time to get to the bus on time, they're sitting downstairs, drinking their coffee. They're waiting in the car. They go for a walk around the block and come back, 5 minutes before. They do whatever they have to do to self-care, self-soothe, focus on themselves, and get out of the chaos of their home. And guess what? They're removing the stimulus. So the stimulus, most parents don't realize this. And one of the best ways to eliminate behaviors is remove the stimulus. Guess who the stimulus is? You. You're the stimulus. So you remove yourself from that environment. You're no longer constantly checking in, checking in, checking in because your child is so prompt dependent. You remove yourself, that child becomes a lot more productive. I'm not saying expect overnight success, but over time, the brain learns, wait a second, the stimuli is not there anymore. I'm not getting dopamine via negative behavior, via avoidance, via non-compliance. Now it's time for me to do the right thing, get to the bus on time, go to school, and that gives me dopamine instead. So we remove that stimuli. We remove all of that prompting, all of that checking in. Did you do your homework? Did you do this? Did you do that? Is inviting a fight. You're inviting an argument because of that negative attention seeking behavior. The more you fade back. So focus on the environment, not the child. You control your environment, not your child. Eliminate screens so they're not just frying their brain on screens all day. Eliminate yourself from all of those things and watch your child naturally progress into independence. Because this is the constant conundrum and what leads to so much ADHD parenting burnout is, number one, your child is prompt dependent and they need the prompts. But when you do prompt, it leads to fights. So the only thing to do is to persevere through the discomfort. Because if you're getting parenting advice, it's not going to feel good. You're going to have to go through things that feel uncomfortable. There's too much parenting advice out there that I call feel good parenting advice. If it feels good, it's probably not going to work. No growth comes from in the comfort zone. You're going to have to be uncomfortable. So learn that, hey, when I fade back, when I stop stepping in, things actually get better. And the only way to make that happen is to be uncomfortable.
I like that. And that's true like with anything. When you're building
Yep.
muscles, you have to strain your muscle a little bit. You got to grow in anything. You have to kind of ride on that edge of discomfort. What's the discerning line here between, if I'm a parent and I'm listening, okay, well, Michael's telling me to step back and I got to just step back. Well, and so what's the discerning line between scaffolding and stepping back?
Yeah, so scaffolding is great. Somewhere, what parents do is they focus too much on verbal prompts. So, what parents need to realize is language makes dysregulation worse. So, all of the talking, all of the words, all of the prompting, words, 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 is inviting the arguments. Language gets them dysregulated. All of the language in their head, all of the monologues, all of the lectures, all of the words is making things worse. So, create some visuals, get some pictures of your kids being successful at the task. Instead of chasing them around in the morning routine, get a picture of them standing in front of the front door, fully dressed, backpack on, lunch in hand, ready for the bus.
With a time with a clock next to them that
With
shows
a
the right
clock right
time.
next to them that shows it and highlights it with a dry erase marker. Get a picture of what their room looks like when it's clean. Get a picture of them with all the boxes checked off, done with homework. Get a picture of them outside playing. Find other ways to prompt besides using all of these words. That's scaffolding. Google the prompt hierarchy. That's a really fascinating thing, is to show the different ways to prompt someone, and that's true scaffolding, to go from maximum to moderate to mild prompting over time towards independence. So yes, you don't want to, in so many ways, you don't want to fade back completely unless your child is successful at doing the task. Can my child get dressed on their own? They should be doing it on their own. Can my child pack their own lunch? They should be doing that. Can my child message a friend and set up a play date on their own? They should be doing that. So if they can do it on their own, they should do it on their own. If they require some scaffolding because they're not at that age yet, then yes, provide that scaffolding, but find ways to do it using as little language as possible.
I like that. What if I'm a parent right now and I'm listening to this and I'm liking what I'm hearing, but I'm still feeling stuck somehow internally. Like what's a small shift someone can try today to support their child's executive function?
Well, one of the biggest things is to find ways to give them varied experiences. Varied experiences is the name of the game. So, one of the best things you can do if you listen to this interview and you connect with it, sit down with your partner, your spouse, a friend, if you're a single parent, whatever it may be, and just go through hour by hour. What is your child actually doing? That gives us the best insight into this child's baseline, development, level of skills. What are they doing on a day to day basis? If most of their time is spent on screens, you better do something about those screens. Too many parents are stuck in this pipe dream of a balance. I want to keep the screens in their lives, but I want a balance of screens plus productive tasks. It's not going to happen. They're going to choose those. They're going to choose those screens 100 times out of 100 every time. Period. Screens make parenting harder, not better. Parents, every time you give your kid a screen, you're telling them, I need you to shut up. You're too much. I don't trust you. Be on the screen and leave me the hell alone. There's other ways to do it. And when I say screens, I mean video games and touch screens. They can sit and watch TV. That's fine. Just no YouTube on the smart TV. There was no youth mental health crisis when TVs were the only screen in the house. The youth mental health crisis happened with smartphones, online video games, and iPads. So, one of the biggest things is, start to look at what is my child doing on a day-to-day basis, and how can I reach out to other parents in my community who probably are also living this dark secret of horrible behaviors in the home and parenting burnout, and say, hey, I'm sick and tired of these screens. And the parent says, yeah, so am I. Okay, let's eliminate them at the exact same time. Let's send our kids outside. Let's drop our kids off at the playground. Let's let them play in my backyard on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, my backyard on, Tuesday, Thursday, and let's have them playing together as much as possible. Find ways to get your kids doing different things every single day. That's what builds the muscle of the brain and develops that prefrontal cortex.
So I'm a parent listening right now, and I'm saying, like, oh crap, my kids are in high school. They're in late high school. I've been, allowing them to be willy nilly with all this stuff since they were 9 or 10 or whatever. That I'm feeling incredibly guilty right now. For missing the signs, or maybe I think I failed in some way. What do you say to that parent right now?
I say absolutely never too late. Do not wave the white flag. We have an entire high school program, young adult independence program, college success program. There's many parents that don't realize, it's not your fault that your kid got addicted to screens. You happen to raise your child during this era of big tech, capitalizing off of kids, big tech capitalizing off of neurodiversity. So you are stuck in this rut just like millions and millions and millions of other parents, but do something about it. I'm sorry, you are most likely going to piss your child off. They're going to be upset. They're going to tell you you are the worst parent ever. They're going to tell you they hate you. They're going to compare you to all of your friends' parents and say that no one else is doing this. You're going to have to make your child uncomfortable to give them the skills that you need and break yourself out of this rut. Having high schoolers on their phone all day, on social media. Social media was created for college kids originally, where you can run into someone freshman year and never see them again until senior year. So why do kids who go to high school need social media when they see the same exact kids every single day at school? It's not necessary. They don't need it. We have elementary school girls wearing anti-wrinkle cream now because of social media.
Oh, it's
It's
crazy.
it's 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 insane. So eliminate all of those things. Your son or daughter does not need those things to make friends or keep friends. You remove them, they'll make more friends. Do something about it. Don't wave the white flag. Yes, it's going to be hard, but that's parenting. You need to be that mean parent, not bad, but you need to be that mean parent sometimes. Set the boundary, lay down the law so that your child can have a better life than you did before them.
You only say that mean parent because that's what your kid's going to call you. You're
Yeah.
really being an assertive parent, and
Yeah, you're
right?
being an educated parent,
Yeah.
following. There's so much information out there now about what screens do to the brain. We just had that adolescence Netflix show. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. There's
Hmm.
so many accounts on social media that have millions of followers and are constantly saying what screens do to the white matter of the brain and the gray matter of the brain and the amygdala, and just it's creating drug addicts. So we could not possibly have more information about how negatively screens impact the brain. There was just a study done on this girl softball team that gave up, their phones for the season, and they did brain scans. In the beginning, their brain looked like a drug addict's brain. And at the end of the season, after weeks of no phone, their brain was back to normal. So we could not possibly have any more research than we have, but parents still don't want to deal with 2, 3, 4 weeks of horrible behaviors to improve their kids' brains long term.
That's a hopeful piece of science. I think
Yeah.
that that you can. It reminds me of like science around alcoholism, where you see like you see some fMRI studies and you see like a lack of blood flow to the prefrontal region, that for people who are regularly using, but then after treatment over time and not using anymore, you see some of the a lot of the blood flow beginning to return. And so that kind of reminds me of that correlation.
Yeah.
To add to layer to double down on that hope idea. I mean, you train people all over the place in this country, all over the world. I mean, what's something that gives you hope right now into how maybe or is there something that gives you hope right now into how education is evolving around ADHD?
Of course, yeah. And there should be lots of hope because we know more about ADHD and executive functions now than we ever did. For decades, we looked at it as an attention disorder, school based, time management, organization nonsense. Now we know what it really is. Now we know what works. We know that it has to be true parent training. All of this cognitive behavioral therapy, counseling, socio-emotional, social skills classes, none of that is helping.
Let
Don't
me
waste
put
your
my
time.
kid over here for an hour a week, and that
Yeah,
should do it.
stop wasting your time. Embrace authoritative parenting, not authoritarian parenting. Very different. Authoritative parenting. Please Google it when you have some time and learn how warm and democratic and reciprocal it is, and learn more about that and follow the research. And executive functioning and the prefrontal cortex is the most plastic part of the brain. That is where true neuroplasticity happens. The prefrontal cortex takes 30 years to develop, and it develops through relationships and experiences, not workbooks and worksheets and therapies and lectures. It's by doing as many different things as possible and meeting as many different people as possible. That is the goal. Sign your kids up for multiple different things. Play based, doesn't have to be rigorous or things like that. Get them involved in their community. Get them playing face to, and just, utilize, parents out there, utilize your neighborhood Facebook group, utilize your neighborhood school district Facebook group, and reach out to parents and say, hey, I heard this great interview on this great podcast, and I'm sick and tired of these screens. Let's get rid of ed tech. Let's get rid of these Chromebooks. Let's eliminate screens, all of us together in this town, and let's get our kids, all of us together. Let's all meet at this park at 6 p.m. every single day. Who's with me? And parents are going to say, hell yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. And you're going to see these kids progress, learn to self-regulate, and very much improve their quality of life.
That's such a skillful piece of advice, because I think back to some of those questions I've asked in this interview. I said, I'm a parent right now. I'm feeling, this and that. Like, and I'm saying basically this sounds good, but it's so hard. When you get other parents involved, if you think like, what's the one thing I can do to support all these things that I'm hearing here? If you can get one other parent involved or two other parents involved, you're way more likely. This is going to be a lot easier. It's going to be easier anyway,
Yep.
and more likely to be successful. And it's think like all the stuff I'm hearing, all I really need to do is get one parent involved, two parents involved. Just to kind of close, because I'm aware of our time and I want to be respectful of your time and everyone who's listening. In your own journey with doing this, all the people that you've worked with, where was a moment that you felt like, okay, this is why I do this work?
Ooh, that is a great question. As I'm becoming a bit of an old man now, one of the fascinating things is being able to watch my students across the lifespan. And just yesterday, out of nowhere, this parent called me, and I had the name saved in my phone, and I was like, what is this? Like, this was literally a family I worked with back in 2015, over 10 years ago, or right around 10 years ago. And he was telling me about his son who, they've tried, they lived very far away. So we worked together for like a year, and then, tried other things. This is back when I was first starting out, and I was willing to drive, an hour, 2 hours to work with a student. And they told me about how, they've tried so many different therapies and so many approaches, and nothing has worked. And their son has always had very fond memories of the GrowNOW program and working directly with me, and how it improved their quality of life and improved their confidence and all of those sorts of things. And I remember being very, hard on this student and very hard on these families, and hearing that, I was someone that he actually remembered. I worked with him when he was so young. And to hear that he actually remembered me, and the dad actually remembered me, it just blew my mind. And on top of that, all the families that we've worked with, that we've helped the parents regain their parental authority, eliminate screens, and the kid just vastly improves in so many areas, to the point where the parents say, hey, you're doing well, I want you to have your Xbox back. And then the kids themselves say, no, I don't want it back. We worked with one student where he was doing so well, and the mom said, here, take your Xbox back. And he said, no, actually, I want to invite all of my friends over that I now have. I actually have real in-person friends, and I want to blow up my Xbox in the backyard with everybody. And he did that. He invited all his friends over, and he blew up his Xbox, and he never played Fortnite or Minecraft again.
Wow.
So that's what it's all about. When you work on executive functions and you empower parents to reclaim their authority and set boundaries, kids feel safe under authoritative parenting. They don't feel safe when parents connect with every single emotion and are so responsive to every single problem. When you work on executive functions, you improve quality of life, and that's what it's all about. It's not teaching them math and science and social studies, which AI is going to do anyway. We're actually working on real quality of life.
Right. And that's really what we're after. And I feel like if you're a parent, I'm listening right now because I'm a parent too, and I'm thinking about like what's most important here, and that real quality of life. That's the North Star we're looking for. Well, Michael, thank you so much for this. Has been a great learning experience for me too, and I know for everyone who's listening here. Where can people learn more about you? I want to make sure they can find your stuff, because there's probably a number of people here saying like, okay, I want to look more into his work or attend your trainings, or if they're someone who's involved with the school or anything like that, like where can they get involved?
Of course, yeah. So my website is GrowNOWADHD.com. If you're interested in getting your child executive functioning coaching plus parent training, fill out the form on the website. You'll get a link to set up a call directly with me. You'll speak directly with me before moving forward and pursuing the services. If you're interested in school professional development or any sort of professional development, parent training, school training, professional training, there's a section of my website directly for that. You fill out that form, and we have an information call to learn more, a discovery call to learn more about how I can help and how I can tailor my training towards your specific audience. It's never the same presentation twice. I always tailor it towards your population and the population that you serve. So my website, GrowNOWADHD.com, and you can find me on Instagram at GrowNOWADHD. So I always try to put some videos on there and information for, that's helpful to parents to kind of get little tidbits of information. So if you heard this podcast today, send me a DM on Instagram and let me know what you think. And I always love to chat with the people that take time out of their day to listen to me speak. So definitely send me a DM, send me an email, call me on my cell phone number, which is on the website. So definitely reach out. I love to hear from everybody.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Michael. I look forward to having more conversations again in the future.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having me. And thank you for everything you do as well. You're doing some incredible work.
Okay. Bye for now. Bye. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Emotional Longevity Podcast. I hope you found it as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit like down below, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone you know who could benefit from these insights. Your support helps us grow this incredible community and reach more people who need it. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to truly integrate these ideas into your life, I'd love to invite you to join me in a beautiful, supportive community that's doing this transformative work together. It's a space where you'll find guidance, connection, and the tools you need to create lasting emotional health and resilience. Check out the links in the description below to learn more. And before you go, make sure to tune into our next episode. It's one that you won't want to miss. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, emotional health isn't about just feeling good. It's about building the foundation for a longer, healthier, and more joyful life. I'll see you soon.